Kentucky Fried Chicken. Well, KFC, formerly known as Kentucky Fried Chicken, it's leaving Kentucky. The headquarters is leaving Kentucky and headed to Texas. We'll discuss about why. Andy Barr, once again, back in the news. Poor guy, he's trying really hard to get this campaign off the ground before he even declares, but he just keeps getting smacked in the face. This time around, he decided to really strike an anti-McConnell point with text messages he sent out. The problem for Andy Barr is that videos exist that paint quite a different story about him and, well, McConnell and his relationship that makes it a little bit harder for Andy Barr to claim that he's suddenly hard on McConnell. We'll go into that. Kentucky Doge bills are filed, one in the Senate, one in the Roberts. They're actually different. They don't seek to do the same thing. They're doing kind of two different things. We'll discuss about what those bills are supposed to do and not do, and just general opinions on what they may or may not be able to accomplish. We'll also go into a few things that have worked its way through the legislature this week. House passing a resolution and put 10 Commandments back up. Vape issues, once again, coming up again. The legislators really want to take down those mean evil vape companies, or vape stores, I guess. Driving while on the phone has a bill that's moving. And a few other things that are worth talking about. So we'll be digging into all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Please make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you're listening to this on a podcasting platform, make sure you take a few seconds to leave that 5-star review. It really does help spread the word, helps more people view it. But let's dig down into it. So kicking us off here, KFC headed to Texas. Why is that? There's a lot of companies actually relocating themselves to Texas for some simple reasons, and it really has to do with tax policies, specifically on how they treat businesses as well. Because when you look at Kentucky, okay, so Kentucky has been doing a personal income tax cut, right? However, Kentucky has not done anything here of recent really regarding business taxes other than increase them. For an example, in order to pay for these personal income tax cuts, the legislature didn't decide to go ahead and just, spend less money, which would be what you'd want them to do, like just spend less. If you're going to cut taxes, you shouldn't increase spending. You should decrease spending to make up for it. But the legislature wasn't going to have that. So they need to get their money from somewhere else. So they increased the categories that they charge sales tax in. We're talking categories like, massage therapy now gets charged as sales tax. Alarm systems charged as sales tax. And one of the places where you're charged as sales tax now is your software subscriptions, those kinds of things, and also your marketing. Now, remember, sales taxes are paid based upon where the services are being delivered. So, for an example, if Texas doesn't have a sales tax on software and you move your business to Texas, you immediately just saved 6% on your software costs. And for a company like Yum Brands, KFC, something like that, they could potentially be spending several $1 million a year on various software products, whether that's simple things like Word, etc., or CRMs, management software, throughout processing software. And so that savings alone could potentially be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. Then you take into account another place where they expanded out sales tax just a few years ago, and that's on marketing. When you figure a marketing budget of $10 million, well, geez, you take 6% of that, which, KFC might spend. I mean, most of what corporate does is marketing, of course. You immediately see your bills go up. So by moving to Texas, by headquartering out of Texas versus Kentucky, KFC could be potentially saving millions of dollars a year just on sales tax policies. before we get into local taxation problems, before we go into business taxation problems. And look, we know that our tax burden's too high. You know how we know that? You know how the legislators know that? You know how Bashir knows that? Because we have to give so many handouts to companies to get them to do business here. For an example, and they're recently they're building a new data server farm in Louisville, big data server farm thing. And in order to get that server farm built, they had to offer them a 50-year exemption on paying sales taxes. For 50 years, that server farm will not have to pay sales taxes. And that was done specifically to try to get that server farm there. Now, you could say, look, you know, if we need to be giving 50-year tax exemptions out to companies to get them to decide to at least locate here for now, for I guess the next 50 years, because it'll be worth it to them to save it. It's worthwhile for them to do so. And on top of, you know, free land, local exemptions on you know, taxes and property taxes, etc. If they're doing that, what's that say about our current taxing situation? Or for an example, you have in Louisville, I do believe Churchill Downs doesn't pay property tax. They've been given an exemption. So what's been going on here in Kentucky is that certain businesses have been picked and chose based upon if they're one of the chosen businesses or not, based upon if they have the right lobbyists, you know, are they paying their dues to the Chamber of Commerce, of course, here in Kentucky? Are they paying out enough money politically to the people in power? And if they are, they get special treatment, and that special treatment includes exemptions from taxes. And then at the same time, those coming in to make it look good. Look at all these jobs we're bringing in. Because they don't talk about net jobs, they talk about new jobs, right? And so they'll take money and shell it out to bring in these businesses. So before we get even into the just how hard it is to literally operate in Kentucky due to the websites and the softwares and the customer service that is experienced at the state level, before we even get into that debacle, the problem here that the state overall has adopted, the policy that the legislature in Bashir has adopted, is one to, hey, we don't give two cares about the current existing businesses unless they're paying, you know, their legal bribes off to the politicians. We don't care. We only care about making whatever deals we need to make to new businesses coming in. And then if you're special enough, maybe we'll give you an exemption. But the people paying for this are all the current businesses. It's kind of like, you know, maybe Spectrum or a cell phone company. They're focusing on bringing in customers while delivering an absolutely horrible product to your existing customers that you don't need to spend millions of taxpayer funds on in order to entice to come into the state. That's why KFC is leaving Kentucky. They may say it's to streamline operations or blah, blah, blah. It's not. It's because Kentucky's a hard business to do business in. It's expensive. And so they got to get out. And if Kentucky doesn't change, if the legislatures and Bashir don't stop with this cash handouts to just new businesses and calling that a success for the day, instead of actually popping the hood and changing the policy of what's causing all these problems, these issues are going to continue. Now, switching a little bit here, talking about Andy Barr again, of course. Unfortunately, Andy Barr has been talked a lot about on this show recently over the last few episodes. Not that I want to talk about Andy Barr per se. That election itself is over a year away. I wish it didn't have as much news going on in it as it does. But unfortunately, Andy Barr keeps making some unfortunate decisions that are blowing up in his face. Because Andy Barr's trying to strike a anti-McConnell chord. He's seen that, McConnell's polling numbers clearly are absolutely in the toilet. And so McConnell is aware his polling numbers are in the toilet. You know, his support, his donor support isn't contingent right now upon whether or not you agree or disagree with McConnell. He understands he sucks right now. That's one thing, like I've said about McConnell, he will recognize that when he's not doing well and he knows that he's unpopular, he's makes no mistake about it. He doesn't pretend that he's popular. He doesn't pretend the polls are wrong. He's like, no, the polls are right. I am unpopular, so I understand. Do what you need to do to get elected. And so Barr, in turn, has decided, okay, I'm going to now strike at court against McConnell. That's what I need to do if I want to win this election, the poll data is showing me. So he's trying to go hard early on because he knows if he waits to try to distance himself from McConnell, he's letting somebody else create the narrative. That's one of the problems that goes into politics, is if you don't go out there and create your story, if you don't go out there and create your own narrative about yourself, somebody else is going to do it for you. And right now, Andy Barr is getting the narrative created about him that he is just a McConnell putz. And so he sent out this text, and it went out statewide. Maybe you got it, maybe you didn't, based upon how often you vote and as such. And so he sent out this text where he was sending out this petition here. So he said, must see Representative Andy Barr slams McConnell. For slams is all capitalized. That's why I yelled it at you. Andy Barr slams McConnell for selling America out to China. Watch now and sign. He's got a petition link. Watch now and sign to demand change for Kentucky in the Senate. And of course, it's in a link to his page here, and then it has a interesting little video from the Benny show. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
You say America first, and that is what you want, and I agree with you, of course. Every American, logically, would. However, and I was very excited that you were on the show today, because I popped this up right before my 9 p.m. bedtime last night. This is Mitch McConnell's legacy, and I'm not sure how closely you can see the screen here, but all it is a map between 2000 and 2024, and how the entire manufacturing base of America was gutted in that time. Now, that's the time where Mitch McConnell was in charge of the Republican Party in the Senate. And he was dead set on ensuring that China got as big of a piece of the pie as humanly possible. And it's devastating. I'm not sure you'll ever be able to reverse this, honestly. This is the trade totaled. This is global trade dominance, U.S. versus China. And China has obviously eaten our lunch across the world, around the world, and it's really flipped, frankly. It seemed there are rumblings that you may run either against Mitch McConnell or if he resigns. How would you reverse this, Congressman?
Real quick pause here. So Mitch McConnell today actually announced that he was no longer running for the Senate. So this isn't, and I'm sure people like Barr knew this was coming. So you need to keep that in mind. As he says, potentially run against McConnell. Barr knew when he's sitting here, most likely, that he was never going to have to run against McConnell. And I think that's important. And as you're hearing Benny talk, for those who can't see, which is everybody, this is an audio show, Andy Barr is sitting there. So he is interviewing Andy Barr, and Andy Barr sitting, listening to Benny as he goes through this.
Well, we need an America First policy, and thank goodness we have President Donald Trump, who actually is the first president in my lifetime who has recognized the real threat from China. As these graphics point out, China has engaged in unfair trade practices, and frankly, leaders of both political parties over the last several decades made a huge miscalculation and thought that if we only just traded with China, if we only just allowed them into the trading system, the World Trade Organization, and gave them preferential trading status, if we only just engage with China, that they would somehow democratize, that they would liberalize their system, and that we would introduce free market capitalism into their system. Instead, they exploited that openness. They exploited that mistake. And now they are a peer rival of the United States in many respects. I love what President Trump has done, which is not only to confront the threat from China, but use the levers of American economic power. And I've talked to Secretary Lutnick, Howard Lutnick, who I think will be confirmed this week, and also Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, about how we can push back and use our economic power to relocate supply chains onshore and start standing up for American manufacturers once again. Reciprocity is the goal from this administration on trade. And I'll give you an example from Kentucky. A lot of Chamber of Commerce types, a lot of establishment traditional Republicans say, oh, well, we need free trade and we shouldn't be fighting any of this. We should have access to China and we should have access to these markets. We don't want to start a trade war. That would be disruptive. And you hear that from Democrats in Kentucky who worry about retaliatory tariffs on Kentucky bourbon. But here's the power of the Trump policy on trade. Yes, of course, we want open market access to Europe, and we don't want retaliatory tariffs on Kentucky bourbon exports. But when we went to India, which has 150% tariffs on Kentucky bourbon exports, the largest market in the world, 1.4 billion people, because President Trump and incoming Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick said, you are not treating American bourbon exports fairly, and because we are threatening through President Trump tariffs to achieve reciprocity. Because of that, India and Modi just announced a 50% reduction in tariffs of Kentucky bourbon exports into the largest market in the world. That is what an America First trade policy looks like. We're going to do it to China. We're going to do it to India. We're going to do it to Europe. We're going to do it to the rest of the world so that America has manufacturing back in the United States and we become the number one exporter in the world. And Kentucky bourbon is just one example of how Americans will benefit.
So you remember he sent this out with a comment of Barr slams McConnell. Now, that didn't sound like much of a slamming. Benny was absolutely pointing out that McConnell hasn't been that great for America. He's been doing what he's needed to do for his donors class so he could maintain political power and control. And, Barr didn't, to me, it didn't really sound like Barr pushed back a whole lot. But it'd be fine with, take what he said there. I think on its face, he has some points along with it. Now, he doesn't go into, how we got here. It's weird when you hear Barr talk because obviously he's making some good points about things, but it runs up against a wall when you run into questions about, Barr, you've been in Congress, though, for over 10 years. I mean, he's been in Congress for 12 years, 13 years now? You've been in Congress for some time. And when we look at your voting record, it isn't that great. And in fact, a lot of the things you're now saying you have a problem with, you actually voted for. And it's that flip-flopping that gives me a lot of pause. In fact, and it's even more dramatic when you look at his flip-flop on McConnell. So you remember, he sends out this text, Barr slams McConnell, okay? Now listen to what he had to say on Spectrum I believe this was 4 or 5 months ago, 6 months ago? This is what he had to say on Spectrum. Take a listen.
Final moments with you. I got to ask you, of course, your name continues to get floated around as a person on a long list of candidates to run first to succeed Mitch McConnell in the U.S. Senate whenever that time does come. Have you considered at all looking at a vacancy should it open in the U.S. Senate?
I liked what my mentor, leader Mitch McConnell, said when he announced that he was not going to seek another term as leader of the Republicans in the Senate. He said, I think that my adversaries will be disappointed that I still have gas in my tank. And I've thanked Leader McConnell for his service. And as long as he wants to remain in the Senate, I'm with him because, his legacy is big. So I don't presume anything. And, he plays the long game. I've got to focus on my job in the House. I've got to focus on my job as a leader in the House Financial Services Committee and doing the national security work that we're doing, and I'm happy doing that.
So obviously, different tone than slamming McConnell. I mean, he literally called him his mentor. And some people want to say that, this is what you have to do. If you wanted to be a politician in Kentucky, you had to kiss that ring of McConnell, and you had to push your way through. And you know what? I actually can understand that argument, and I'd have more respect for somebody like Andy Barr if he just came out and said that. Look, he was a power broker in Kentucky for a long time. If you wanted to run and you couldn't shell out the millions yourself to run, you had to go to him. You had to kiss the ring. You had to get his blessing if you wanted to run for office. And for better or for worse, that's how it would be. But despite that, I have my differences with him and then goes through and lay out those. But instead, he's trying to do this 180. Like, he's always been hard on McConnell's China policies. Oh, McConnell isn't leader of the Senate caucus anymore. When he was talking about McConnell, when you're hearing Benny talk about McConnell being leader of the Senate caucus, that ended like a year ago. Andy Barr wasn't slamming McConnell then. He was saying he's my mentor and he's a great man, a great legacy. It's that flip-flopping. It just drives me up a wall, and I take big issue with it. Okay, so moving on from that now, we've got 2 bills filed aiming to create some kind of Kentucky Doge type operation. First, we have out of the Senate. Lindsey Tishner's bill out of the Senate would basically create a new, I don't want to call it government department, but a government cabinet, a new department, right? Department of Government Efficiency, of course, Office of Government Efficiency, and would put the auditor, Allison Ball, currently at the head of that department. Now, the reason why I do believe it would be important to make this a part of government, it's got to be a part of the executive branch. And that's, people who've heard me talk about why I think that here in Kentucky, Doge, if we're putting forward a Doge, we're kind of putting the cart before the horse, because we already have these groups within the legislature. We already have people who are tasked with this job in the executive branch that aren't doing anything. I mean, Allison Ball right now is the auditor, right? And so Kentucky, this committee Doge creation could be created, and then putting it under Allison Ball, they could go through and find and make a lot of cuts themselves. And by making it a part of the executive branch, I see that angle that they're working. Because if you make it a part of the legislature, our state Supreme Court has priorly ruled that the powers of the legislature to limit specific policy, to limit specific spending, like to say that specific contract needs to be cut, or that specific policy needs to change, is limited. The Supreme Court has said that, running of the government should be left up to the governor. You're supposed to just appropriate pots of money. You're welcome to do what you need to do appropriating money. You're welcome to pass laws, but you can't specifically say that that specific policy is a problem or that specific contract's a problem. And that's been a struggle. It has been a struggle for the legislature. Now, I've pointed out there's more than one way to get around it, of course. We'll talk about that here in a second. But so Tishner's would create that within Ball's office. And I think this falls into a category of, once again, cart before the horse. I think that'd be a great idea if we had somebody with a little more creativity as the auditor. The problem we've had historically with some of these office holders is they don't really do much. If Allison Ball was the kind of person that really thinks outside the box and can bring in, because part of what makes Doge successful at the federal level, first you have a person with the power to do it, but what makes Doge successful is that you have Elon Musk is an outside thinker, part of the government now, kind of, but an outside thinker as far as just thinking outside the box, and he approaches things in a different way. He's brought in programmers and tech and people to kind of climb through, and what they've set up is crawlers that crawl through data and trying to find inconsistencies and going right to the data itself. And this is a unique and different approach, because what typically happens, if people just come in and try to read contracts and understand what they're spending money on, they can kind of hide to a degree where the money's going, how's it going there, so on and so forth. But when you actually have crawlers crawling the data doesn't lie. We can see what you're doing. We don't need to read whatever contract you say this money was for. We can see literally who the money went to, and then back ask you, who's it for? And so the auditor has access to that already. So I understand putting that there. However, is Allison Ball the type that's going to bring in, programmers and tech people that are really smart and can do their job, or is she not? And I'm going to tell you right now, the answer is no. And the answer is no is because Allison Ball doesn't come from that world. I mean, Allison Ball she's 43. Okay, Allison Ball is 43. And so let's keep in mind, she's 43. Okay, so She spent 8 years as the Kentucky treasurer prior to that, right? So that puts her about 34 when she took office as the state treasurer. And then prior to that, she worked as a prosecutor, as an assistant prosecutor, assistant county attorney, or fulfilling an assistant prosecutor role within Eastern Kentucky, within the counties there. So she herself doesn't have a lot of private business experience. She doesn't run in those circles. She runs in political circles. And people who run in political circles don't attract the young coder types. They just don't. And the reason why is because they're not cool. They suck, right? I mean, the young coder types, they see things, they see the problems, they want to fix them. And of course, politicians are like, well, we can't be saying that. It's all about the politics. So that's the first problem you run into with somebody like Allison Ball heading this up, which is the reason why I've pointed out that, these Kentucky Doge thoughts, when we already have these things in place, will, I think, run into problems. They won't be as effective and might even be boondoggles that end up actually costing money and don't save us anything because one, we already have these people in place, but two, the reason why the current people we have in place aren't accomplishing what they need to accomplish, those problems still exist. The only way they get fixed is if you have some larger-than-life character like Elon Musk come in with Donald Trump and fix it. I mean, part of what's made Elon Musk effective in Doge, it isn't just that they're finding issues. It isn't just Trump acts on it, but it's also that Elon Musk has a Twitter account literally followed by tens of millions of people. So when he finds something, when he finds an issue, he can go ahead, he can post about it, he can get that information out there, and that creates the public pressure, that creates a realization that, hey, you need to fix these things. That falls onto those within government, kind of falls onto Trump too as well. Now, of course, Trump isn't going to push back on him on acting on those things. He's already empowered him to act on those things, but you're following what I'm saying here. It's this cycle to a degree that is created by the fact that Elon Musk has a large following. One of the things that I find somewhat funny when I talk to people and I talk about things that our state is doing, our government's doing, etc., they'll say, I don't know this is happening. How do we know? How do we find out? And I don't know what to tell you. You got to do the work. I mean, when I post about the things that I find that government's spending money on, wasting money on, I'm finding it by looking at publicly available information, the same as you can look at. But you're busy, and I understand that. So you don't have time to go crawling through those things, and I don't expect you to. I have a passion for it. That's why I do it. I don't expect everybody to do it. But the problem here falls into the fact that people are relying on news and everything else to tell them what's going on. And so the only thing that I could see if a Kentucky Doge is created and it's created by somebody who's effective at their job, that person then on a regular basis, if they're posting every day, every 2 days about things that are spending that's out of control and issues, and then people are following that account, that could be effective. But who knows? I mean, and is Allison Barr that person? Or Allison Ball that person? I don't know. I mean, like I said, we have the issues with thinking outside the box. My general understanding of work ethic is that Allison Ball doesn't have much. I don't know that to be true for myself. I just know, people who've worked in her office have told me that. I've seen her at a library in Lexington on a work day, on a weekday, at like 2:30 in the afternoon, returning books at a library in Lexington. Nowhere near Frankfurt, and it's like, this is like 2:30 on like a Thursday. Like, why aren't you at work? But I don't know. I've just heard that there is a work ethic issue. I heard that when I was on the campaign trail. I was running for treasurer. One of the whispered complaints, because people don't want to talk openly bad about anybody, of course, especially people who Allison Ball's, she's a good Christian. She's a good person. I generally get the feeling she's a good person. And of course, when somebody's just a good person, a good Christian, and especially the only woman, constitutional officer, young mother, when they fall into that category, nobody wants to talk bad about them openly. And I 100% understand that. I mean, it's not that Allison Ball does obviously bad things. She doesn't. She doesn't at all. I'm just saying the feedback I got when I was on the road, the kind of whispered feedback I got when I was running for treasurer and she was leaving as treasurer, was that Allison Ball didn't have didn't work a lot. And so if that is true, then the question becomes, we're creating this Doge, we're giving it to somebody who is a political creature, completely political, never been in business, doesn't have those kind of outside connections. So any of those people that she ends up contacting and getting contact with will not probably be those who are vetted by political sources. So it's just going to become super duper political instead of just really big passion about finding waste, fraud, and abuse. And then also you have a work ethic concern. So that would be my concerns with the approach. Though I do understand the wisdom of creating that within the auditor's office from Lindsay Tishner. Like, if you need to do something, you're like, we need to do something on this. We need to make these kinds of changes in Kentucky. Because trust me, it's frustrating. I mean, those of you who listen to the show know I find these things constantly. And nothing gets done about it. And it's incredibly frustrating. And you can't get our legislative leadership to do something about it. And it's the same frustration on the federal level. We can't get Congress to do something about the spending. They have powers of the purse. They should be able to do something, and we can't get them to do it. It's very frustrating. I understand that. I'm just pointing out, my only thing that I'm pointing out here is that the problems of why we can't do anything still exist, and that's because it's a political process. And we can't get the people to act and to incorporate the right people too. Business people, people from the outside, outside the normal political thought process to get involved. But, I understand. I understand why we're creating it, and I hope it's successful. I'm just voicing why, priorly I've said that we don't really need this. We have all these people in place. Why aren't they doing their jobs? And, creating another committee, I personally don't necessarily see how that gets these people to do their jobs that are currently not doing their jobs. But I'd be 100% wrong. And I hope I am. And then in the House, TJ Roberts and John Hodgson have largely championed this, of making a Doge committee. Kind of statutory kind of committee with the legislature, where it's members appointed by the legislature to a committee to dig into government action. Same kind of thing. We currently have committees, Government Contract Review Committee, Administrative Regulation Review Committees, that pull up this information, but nothing's being done about it. Same question. What are we going to do here? Moving on from that. Struggle, of course. Let's see. Joint resolution came out of the House. Put up the 10 Commandments back up that was gifted to Kentucky. Display it back up there. It's nice, good decision. Those people who say, 10 Commandments is obviously the basis of our religion. Those kinds of people that say, if we put this up, we have to let other religions in. I think that's a misreading of the Constitution. It's freedom of religion, not necessarily freedom from religion. What that means is that there is to be no state religion. You are not to be forced by law to practice a certain religion. That's what it means. We can't stand up and make you pray to our God if we want to make you pray to our God. We can't do that as a government, right? But it doesn't mean that every single religion that somebody cooks up in their minds has to be, quote unquote, honored with our government institutions. And what I mean by that is they're allowed to have their religious freedoms, but a government institution can decide, in my opinion, to do something like display the 10 Commandments and not have to allow other religions to display their similar type items. Now, of course, the Supreme Courts have oscillated a bit on this, but the intention of freedom of religion never was supposed to be that, we should remove all of God from everything. And we know that that's true because our money literally says, "In God we trust." We have pledge allegiance that says one nation under God. So just something for you to think about. But anyways, 10 commandments going up. Sounds great. For some reason, this legislature has had a lot of issues on vaping. This last session, of course, they passed that bill getting rid of tens of thousands of vape products, put thousands of vapor stores out of business, basically making them either shift their business model or go out of business because they could only sell like 8 products now. And then on top of that, now the legislature is moving forward bills to, I guess, put more teeth into enforcing vape laws. This kind of seems like to me just like, it almost seems like old men standing around grumbling about those newfangled, like those newfangled Game Boys. We need to get rid of them. They're dangerous. Not saying that vape isn't dangerous, and not saying kids should vape. They shouldn't. I mean, but at the same time, when I was growing up in high school, I mean, if we wanted alcohol, if we wanted tobacco, we could get it. We didn't need to, no law was stopping us. Nothing passed at the time. And I guess that has switched over in large part to vaping, and the fact that it has no odor, and the fact that, you can just do it. You can just, I guess, pull it out and rip it right in the locker room, and then they're finding them, drives them crazy. Though, I'll be honest with you, high school I went to, kids dipped, and they would spit into straws. They would bring a big gulp type cup or like a Circle K cup to class with them, and they would look like they were drinking out of a straw, and really what they were doing was spitting their dip spit down into the straw to hide that they were dipping in class. And then of course, you had snus, the kind of tobacco you can swallow. Kids would put those in, Zen packs. They'd put those in their mouths and sit there in class using that all day long when I was in school. So it's just really vaping. It seems like vaping is what's really gotten them upset. And in response to that, what have we seen, right? We've seen them raise the age of buying tobacco to 21. We've seen them ban many products. And we've seen them now trying to strengthen their age restriction laws, put more teeth into them. I'm just something I've noticed is they really hate vaping. And I don't understand why. I guess I don't understand why vaping is getting so much more hate than tobacco and products, traditional tobacco products did when I was growing up. They say, Andrew, you don't get it. Kids vape all the time now. And kids dipped and smoked all the time and drank all the time where I went to school at. So I don't understand it personally. We also have a bill on driving while using the phone. And it's already now illegal to, of course, text and drive. That is already a law here in Kentucky. But this takes it a step further. To read here from the bill now, I'm going to define how it defines first operating a motor vehicle. So it says operating a motor vehicle means to operate a motor vehicle on a highway, including while temporarily stationary because of traffic, a traffic control device, or a momentary delays in circumstances, and does not include a circumstance in which the vehicle has been pulled over to the side of or off an active roadway and has stopped in a location where it can safely remain stationary. Use or uses means using at least one hand to hold a personal communication device, pressing more than a single button to activate, deactivate, or initiate a feature or function of a personal communication device, or reaching for a personal communication device in a manner that requires the driver to no longer be in a seated driving position or properly restrained by a safety belt. So this is just a bill to absolutely 100% ban cell phone usage at all. They do carve out one thing, and that is if you're using it as a GPS. But of course you can't, if you're using it as a GPS, you have to have it mounted. Because remember, using means you have at least one hand holding the communication device. So one hand on the phone. Even if you're not touching anything, you're just holding the phone in one hand while you're driving. Illegal. Straight to jail. Not straight to jail, but illegal. If you're at a stoplight and you pick up your phone just to check what time it is, you press one button, you pick it up with your hand, and you press one button on the side to see what time it is. Illegal. That's what this bill would be. That's illegal, not allowed. If somebody calls you and you don't have a hands-free talking device, and so you answer it and then hold the phone up to your ear while you're driving, illegal. Not allowed. You have to have it, I guess, in a mount if you want to touch it at all while you're driving. And then you can only touch one button. However, like I said, there's a carve out for GPS. So one, it's already illegal to text and drive. Already, there's enhanced punishments for distracted driving. Those things already exist. Correct. And now we're adding to that, if you literally touch your phone while you're driving, if you hold your phone while you're driving, that's now against the law, unless it's in a mount and you're using it as a GPS. And that leads to another problem here, because while it is currently illegal to text and drive, I don't personally ever see that being enforced, because it's really, really hard to enforce it because there's carve-outs. In the same way that there's carve-outs here for using the phone as a GPS, and there has to be. On top of that, we run into the issue here that, and when they say when you're even stopped at a red light. So, emergency call. Somebody calls you. You're at a red light. This bill makes it to where you can't even pick up the phone, answer it, and hold it up to your ear at a red light even. Now, I know some of you out there are like, yeah, using these phones while driving, that's crazy and insane. First, I challenge you, while you're driving, even at a red light, and you get a call, to not pick up your phone and look at it, at least to see who's calling. You can't even look at it to see who's calling because it's being held in a hand. You'd have to have a mount. You'd have to look over at it. But you can't touch it. It's just, like I said, I understand everyone who wants to stop the distracted driving, using phones while driving, and it's an obvious danger of creating distracted drivers. I hear you 100%. And I don't disagree with that thought. But we already have laws on that. Creating another law that basically says you can't even answer a phone call while you're driving your car or stopped at a red light at a stop sign. I think that's just a touch too far. You can disagree with me. I think it's a touch too far. And I think all the legislators sitting there, like, I would love for them to personally, before they pass this law, for them to personally follow it and see what they can do. See if they can do it. And then see if it's worth a $100 fine every time that they decide to go ahead and violate what their proposed law. The other thing that has always bothered me about this is that, the studies I've read on this have stated that if you put this is from University of Utah, said this, if you put a 20-year-old driver behind the wheel with a cell phone, the reaction times are the same as a 70-year-old driver who is not using a cell phone. It's like instantly aging a large number of drivers. That's what the University of Utah psychology professor David Strayer said. And he conducted a study about reaction times and everything else when it comes to cell phone usage. Which, that leads to the obvious question here. And I've heard that before. I'm sure you've heard it before, that using the phone makes you reaction times of an elderly person. Which leads to the obvious thing here. Why are we creating more and more laws to ban the uses of cell phones? Because, maybe if we triple ban it this time, it'll finally stop. When we could be removing, apparently, a 70-year-old driver, and, between 68 to 72, apparently we need to just be banning them from driving because they always have the reaction time of somebody texting and driving. At least you or I only have it if you're under 68 or so. You or I only have it when we're using our phones while driving. Apparently, they have it all the time. We should just ban them off the road. If that's our goal here, is to eliminate every single possible risk while driving. That's where we should start. But no, I like I said, I understand the desire. I'm not talking about the desire to stop people from using their phone while driving. I just would love for anybody that says, yeah, this is a good bill, good idea, to, for like 3 weeks, for a week even, follow that bill to the letter and tell me that is not just another way to catch well-meaning people and $100 tickets left and right. Well, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooper Show. Thank you all so much for joining me. Back here next week. Hope you have a great rest of your day.